I'm very happy to be here and have the opportunity to talk about the poverty reduction plan that Together BC that we put forward. But I do want to start by acknowledging that we are here on the territories of the Chehalis and Stolo people. I want to start again by thanking the Columbia Institute for all the work that they do and all the sponsors and the supporters of the Institute that over time has built this organization, this institute, in a way that it has just such real value, and particularly real value for local elected leaders. And I want to certainly acknowledge that in this room, we have a room full of smart people, people with experience, with commitment, with knowledge, and people who have committed themselves to making real change and affecting real change in our province. It's something that my ministry is committed to, and it's something across government that we're working to achieve. And Together BC, the poverty plan, is certainly our focus in regard to how we get to poverty reduction in the province. It was about 10 years ago when I had the opportunity as an opposition member, and I think back then, and I see my friend Chuck over here, and Chuck I think would have been in the House at the time that this happened, that I got to introduce a private member's bill on behalf of the official opposition. And it was to introduce legislation, poverty reduction legislation in British Columbia. We made that ask numerous times after that, myself and colleagues of mine who had taken over those critical responsibilities. Time and again, we called on the government to take action, and time and again we were rebuffed. And the response of the government whenever they were asked was, the only poverty reduction plan is a job. And other than that, we have nothing more that we need to do than build a strong economy and jobs. And nobody's going to question that jobs are important. But what we know is that that's just simply not true. And because of that, is what made last October particularly satisfying for me when a little more than a year after we had formed a government, we passed the Poverty Reduction Strategy Act into law. It's legislation that commits us to an overall poverty rate reduction in the rate of poverty of 25% overall and 50% for children over the next 5 years. And it commits to do that within a framework of accountability, transparency, and inclusion. It was historic legislation because it was British Columbia's first attempt at poverty reduction. And that legislation has driven the work and what we released last week, Together BC. It's the first time in this province that we've had a roadmap to set targets and to achieve those targets. For too many years, we were the only province in Canada without a dedicated strategy for long-term poverty reduction. The result of that inaction is that we have the second worst poverty rates in the country, and we have consistently had the worst or near the worst rates of poverty, and often the highest child poverty rates in the country. To give you a sense of that, the numbers for 2016, which are the numbers that we use to develop the legislation and the numbers that the plan is founded on, 557,000 people in British Columbia live in poverty. 100,000 of those are kids. 40% of them have a paycheck coming into the house. They can't make ends meet. If you have a disability, if you are Indigenous, if you are a recent immigrant, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to be on that list than not. For a province as wealthy, as prosperous as British Columbia, these numbers are much, much too high, and we know they don't have to be. Together BC represents a collective effort on the part of the government to address this inequality in British Columbia. We created this plan through an extensive consultation that included thousands of people across the province who shared their stories, their experience with poverty, and their thoughts about how we could make life better for people who are struggling to get by. We talked to about 8,500 people in 28 communities around the province in a very focused consultation process. I put in place an advisory forum, and I see Vivica's here, who is a member of the forum. And that body of work, along with a wide consultation through other avenues, gave us the insights that we needed to be able to put the plan together. It's a plan, it's a strategy that at its heart is about people. It's about the challenges that they face every day just to get by. It's about the right of every British Columbia to be seen, to be valued, to have access to opportunities for a better life for themselves and their families. It's a strategy that reflects a more just and a more inclusive province. And this has been a priority for our government since our first day in office. We heard pretty clearly when we started this work that any poverty reduction plan needed to include the whole of government. That if it was just my ministry, it would fail. And I agree with that. We heard we needed to work with other governments, with business, with labor, with Indigenous people, and within our communities to make the plan a success. And I agree with that as well. Together BC reflects our commitment to a more inclusive approach to tackling this issue. It comprises programs, policies, and initiatives from across our government, tying together investments that have been made over 3 budgets into a thoughtful, a bold, and a comprehensive plan to reduce poverty in British Columbia. We built the strategy on 4 principles: increasing affordability, creating opportunities, greater social inclusion, and a continuing deep commitment to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. For people living in poverty, financial security starts with addressing affordability. That means increasing incomes and putting money back into people's pockets. For many people, and certainly in this province, it starts with an affordable place to live. Everywhere that we've been over the last 20 months, where I've been in conversations around these issues, in every community, the primary concern we heard is the lack of safe, affordable housing. If you don't have your basic needs met, or a home to go home to, a place to go home to at the end of the day, it's pretty much impossible to be able to meet the other challenges you face in life, whether they're health challenges, they're education challenges, they're looking for work. If you don't know where you're going to hang your hat at the end of the day, it's incredibly difficult to be able to meet those other challenges. That's why housing was made a mandate priority by the government, by the Premier, and was initiated very early on in our time and was the cornerstone, along with childcare, of our first full budget. And we've made some progress. We brought in stronger protections for renters, including lowering the maximum rent increases, and we've strengthened and put more resources into the residential tenancy branch. We've committed to 37,000 directly funded units of affordable housing. About 17,000 of those are at some point in play now. Housing for families and seniors, campus housing for students, on and off reserve Indigenous housing, and safe places for women escaping violence. And we've started the work that we need to do on homelessness. It started with a rapid response to homelessness, working with local governments across this province to get the 2,000 new modular units with wraparound services in place across our province, and now those 2,000 units are essentially open. In Together BC, we took further steps, adding additional funding for more modular housing and establishing the Office of Homelessness Coordination. This marks our shift from what we learned in the provincial homelessness count, the shift from essential emergency responses to a more coordinated, proactive approach that focuses on prevention. and that looks at how do we keep people from falling into homelessness. We know we need to have the Housing First model to address people who are facing this experience. We need to work and do a better job at how to keep people from falling into homelessness. The coordination office is working with partners across government and in the community to develop a more coordinated response. So it's come to my ministry now to do that coordination, working very closely with Minister Robinson, who I know was here and spoke to you. She has BC Housing, who's the delivery agent for the housing. Also working very closely with Minister Darcy, because we know we have a significant numbers of people who are struggling with mental health and addiction issues, who face the challenges of homelessness as well. We also, though, know that the solution is not going to be a provincial solution alone. Homelessness is an issue that's very localized in many communities. I know that when we identify the 26 people that are identified in Cranbrook as homeless, I expect we could go and talk to people in Cranbrook and they could give us the names of those people and talk to us about their experience and about how we support them, versus the thousands of people in Vancouver or the thousands of people in Metro Vancouver who are far too anonymous, and how we meet the challenges there. So this needs to be a strategy that is about community and about support from people like yourselves, who are the leaders at the local community level. As I said, our key here is to look at prevention. We are looking to offer better stability to make sure homelessness is a one-time occurrence for people who do fall. One of the things we learned is that while a majority of people in the research we did told us that it was mostly an economic issue, very quickly we learned that after a period of time, the mental health issues become real. And that should come as no surprise to anybody, that if you lose your home, if you're struggling on the street, you're going to face stresses and mental health issues that are real. And for far too many people, part of the response to that is to self-medicate. And then the addictions issues become very real too. So we know we need to get at folks quickly. We also know we need to support young people. One of the things we found for those, when we identified the thousands of people who are living homeless, 52% of those folks who were chronic told us they had their first experience of homelessness as a youth. So it started very early. So we need to focus and ensure that as we transition, particularly as youth who are in care or youth who are escaping difficult situations, that as they transition from youth to adult, that they don't fall through the cracks. And we're working very hard to make sure we put in place the methods to be able to address that as we move forward. We know that people who are struggling with their rent face challenges sometimes just of getting through and making that work every month. It's one of the reasons we put $10 million into a provincial rent bank program, and that program is being developed now, and we'll be rolling that out very shortly, as simply a way to support people across the province who can't quite make it work this month or are having a tough time. Nobody should lose their home because of that. And if we can support people to make sure that that doesn't happen, then we will do that. So we know very much that we can't address poverty if we don't help people find and keep a home. Just like we can't lift children out of poverty without helping their parents. That's why we're eliminating the cost of childcare for more than 27,000 low-income families over the life of the childcare plan. And we're lowering the cost of licensed childcare for thousands more, removing the kinds of financial burdens so that parents can have the opportunity to be able to do better for themselves, so that women who are making choices know that they can get support for their kids as they make choices to pursue training and employment opportunities that will help them to build the futures they want. Together BC hopes our expectation we will lift even more children and their families out of poverty with a new child opportunity benefit. A benefit that will see parents get thousands of dollars of financial support for their children between birth and the age of 18. A family with one child will receive as much as $28,800, and a family with two children as much as $40,000 by the time their children reach the age of 18. This piece of work here is a cornerstone for our objective to lift 50,000 kids out of poverty over the next 5 years. As I said before, we know that 40% of the people living in poverty today have a paycheck coming into the house. Many of them more than one paycheck coming into the house. Yet they struggle to get by. That's why, with much work by the Federation of Labor on the Fight for 15 and our agreement with the Greens in the CASA agreement, we established the Fair Wages Commission. And their direction was to put us on a path to $15 an hour. And we will make $15.20 an hour by 2021. That will make a difference for about 400,000 people in the province who will see more money for that. About 150,000 of those people are facing struggles in poverty, and at least 25,000 folks will be lifted out of poverty by that minimum wage increase. We also appointed an expert committee to study basic income. We've asked them to research how the principles could improve the existing income and support programs in British Columbia, as well as to answer the broader question about guaranteed annual income. We're expecting to see the results of that work next year, and I am convinced that when we see that work, and it's going to generate a vigorous debate in this province about how we move forward on income security in British Columbia. I'm looking forward to that debate. My ministry is committed. We are adding $700 million in my ministry over the next 3 years targeted at poverty. And that's just the beginning. We've increased income and disability rates twice in 20 months to give a single person an additional $1,800 a year and a couple an additional $2,400 a year. These are the first increases in income assistance in over a decade, and I know that they don't go far enough, but we're working on it. I also know that poverty isn't just about money. It's about belonging. Supporting people on social assistance is about more than rates. Through Together BC, we will eliminate some of the most harmful policies introduced by the previous government, introduced in my ministry. People told us that discrimination and stigma make it harder for them to access the services they need. We're working to create a culture in my ministry and across government that reflects empathy, understanding, and respect for everyone who needs help. And we're looking to do this in every ministry across government. We are introducing policies that lift people up. We're looking at policies that will end MSP, expand pharmacare, and allow families to access the medication that they need and that they can afford. We're working with the President's Group, a network of corporate leaders to encourage everyone to develop accessible and inclusive workplaces. As a group, they are encouraging other business leaders to see the value and importance of hiring people with disabilities. Reconciliation with Indigenous people is fundamental to Together BC. We know that poverty doesn't affect everybody the same way. Ongoing systemic racism means the reality for Indigenous people is that they are much more likely to be poor. Yet despite government policies that over the years have suppressed Indigenous people and communities, they remain strong and resilient. But government action is needed to address the lasting impacts of these policies, and our government and my ministry are committed to that. And opportunity. Partnerships with all levels of government, with communities, with business, are key to creating the opportunities we need to break the cycle of poverty. British Columbia has the lowest unemployment rates in the country and the highest rates of poverty. There are thousands of people living with low or no income who just need a little bit of help, and we can provide that. Together BC will invest $2 billion over the next 6 years into employment programs to support and improve education, skills training, and opportunities for people. There are a lot of reasons to reduce poverty, because it's the right thing to do, because we care about our neighbors, because we care about the kind of world that we want to leave for our kids. And then there are the costs. Alleviating poverty does save money. It's good for the economy. When we increase incomes for people living in poverty, every dollar gets spent on food, on housing, on goods and services in communities. People spend the money where they live. Combined, the initiatives of Together BC will quite literally put hundreds of millions of dollars a year into the pockets of people living in poverty. That's hundreds of millions of dollars going back into local economies. But this has to be more than simply a string of investments. The initiatives in Together BC are essential to meeting our targets, but we know we have a lot more to do. This is a living plan. It will inform government direction moving forward. It is the foundation of our work with other levels of government, with business, labor, and community. And it's work that we know we can't do alone. We've set the foundation. Now we need to work together across sectors. Those of you in this room today are going to be our critical partners in this work. And we'll be looking for how we can work together to achieve our collective goals. Through the investments in this strategy and the work that is still to come, we can make the lives of hundreds of thousands of people better. We can't afford to take care of each other. Our province is doing well, our economy is strong, and in a province so rich, it is so wrong for so many people to be living in poverty. It doesn't reflect who we are as a people or who we are as a society. None of us wants to see people left behind. We know poverty is a big and complex problem. It has many causes and requires many solutions. And like all complex problems, we will succeed if we work together to solve it. By working together across government, across sectors, and within communities, we will lift 140,000 British Columbians out of poverty in the next 5 years. But these efforts truly are only the beginning. There is a future beyond our targets that we all aspire to, a more secure, sustainable, and inclusive future, where prosperity and dignity for all is possible. It's ambitious, it's difficult, it'll take time, but together we can make it happen. As leaders in your communities, we look to you as our partners. Together we can break the cycle of poverty, we can build a better BC for everyone, and we are committed to doing it. And with you in this room, we will achieve it together. Thank you very much.